It was a low-budget feature which aimed to bring modern Indigenous music to a non-Indigenous audience. Back in 1981, the film, The Wrong Side of the Road, won a string of awards here and overseas. It followed the lives of Aboriginal bands Us Mob and No Fixed Address. But the film also exposed the racism faced by Indigenous Australians at the time in the 80s.
There's nothing wrong with the car, boy. If you hadn't got all your half-caste bastards, the mates would have been all right.
Start that, mate. You fucking... Either you pay us fucking $90 a week or we're fucking going. That's it.
I'm not paying
You're fucking ripping us off.
I'm not paying any $90 a week, fellow.
You fucking just start, mate, or
we'll blacklist you. We'll blacklist you.
Don't you fucking...
More than 30 years on, Wrong Side of the Road has been remastered frame by frame, and it'll screen tonight at the Sydney Film Festival. The director, Ned Lander, joins us in the breakfast studio. Ned, welcome to breakfast.
Good morning, Fran.
32 years on, Ned, how does the film stack up to you?
Well, I think it's sort of still pretty fresh. It was a film that really tried to put youth culture and Indigenous youth culture front and centre. It was the energy of the film, I think, that attracted audiences at the time, and I think it's the energy of the film that'll attract audiences now.
The film has a particular look. It looks like a doco, it sort of feels like a doco, but it's not. This is a fictional story.
This is true. It's a very interesting mix genre-wise. We were looking at films like Jimmy Cliff's The Harder They Come, and also films like Ken Loach's Poor Cow and Kathy Come Home and things like that. And we were looking at the way people used that sort of veracity and feel to talk about things that are real but that have been constructed in a fictional way. Wrong Side of the Road did that. It took stories from the guys in the bands, the real bands that were happening. We took bits of their life stories. We sat down with each one of them, recorded those life stories, and then sort of transposed that into this 48-hour road movie.
Now, it feels very much like a road movie.
It is a road movie, and it's got the fun of a road movie.
It's got the fun of the road movie, but it also has the dark issues of racism, and it's very, it hits you in the face when you watched it back in 81. That's when I first saw it, and I think it'll hit you in the face now. Some of the issues remarkably prevalent still. I mean, one of the thread stories through is a story of a member of the stolen generation searching for his parents. There's the stories of Aboriginal Australians going to visit, family members in prison. This was before the Royal Commission into deaths in custody. There's issue of police relations.
Come on, Sambo. I thought I told you to get the stuff off the truck. Fucking get it out. You want to look at it? Don't give me any lip. Just get the stuff off the truck. Fucking what?
He can do it all himself. He's an educated man.
Well,
just
don't
leave
push.
right out.
Right away, will you? Push to stay out of it, fella. Hold her, I'll blow your fucking head off. I can't say about around you. Oh, fuck.
You'd have to say on the face of it, I think police relations with Indigenous Australians are a lot better in some cases today. That is an area maybe where I think there's been some real improvement.
Look, we were talking about this yesterday. We've got all the guys up from Adelaide that are still with us, and sadly we've lost quite a few people who were in the film, and sadly a lot of people are still experiencing on a day-to-day basis the racism, the health problems and all sorts of issues.
I'm not suggesting they're not experiencing it, but do they say to you they think things have improved at all?
Look, I think talking to the guys yesterday, it kind of brought me back to earth a bit, I have to say. I've remained hopeful, and I think a lot of white fellas remain hopeful that things are getting better. But I have to say that life has been tough, and that people were talking about that when we got together yesterday. We did a big oral history yesterday about the film. And at the same time, people have kept going. You've got people like Bart Willoughby who's still out there playing music and really has made an enormous
a real contributor
mark.
In the music scene. But you mentioned those who are sadly not with us anymore, and this is another theme we talk about so regularly on this program, along with those other themes I just mentioned, is the high mortality rates. That's why we have a whole closing the gap strategy.
That's right. We've lost 2 members of Us Mob out of the 4. Fortunately, all of No Fixed Address guys are still with us, but we've lost the 2 older women who are in the film. We've lost one of the younger members of, one of the younger members of No Fixed Address, Veronica Rankin, who played saxophone. She's passed away. Her son has passed away. You know, we've lost a lot of people out of that film. But it was a dynamic time. As you said, it touched on a whole lot of things like those issues of stolen generation and so on. This was a time when that phrase hadn't even been coined. This was a time before people even had the words to describe this terrible thing that had happened to Aboriginal families. And this was a time when people were still finding it hard to talk about those things. So the story in the film is played by Les, who's a guitarist in No Fixed Address. It was actually the story of Ken Hampton, who was one of the roadies, and he gave his story to Les. Ken found his family 6 weeks after the end of the film and is very proud today, and I was talking to him yesterday, to talk about his story, but it's still very painful too.
So the issues and the pain, still there. The issues, some of them still there. Maybe some improvement on some fronts. Perhaps what's not still there that we see so front and centre in this film is the Indigenous bands. I mean, I remember that period. I remember these bands, and there was a lot of them around the country. Is there less Indigenous music today?
Oh, look, I think you've still got it happening. I think there's hip-hop bands in Newcastle and Sydney. There's, and I think
if you really have a look.
If you have a look, it's there. And I guess that energy's still there. This was an extraordinary time. This was a time, an outpouring of creative energy, and you had lots of things happening soon after that. You had the Cuckles, you had Warumpi Band, you had Yothu Yindi, and people really starting to make it into that world. And in fact, I think Wrong Side of the Road, the album that came out of it, was, I think, the first commercial release of contemporary music. Prior to that, Aboriginal people had both kinds of music, country and Western, but this was the first sort of rock and reggae to come out, and it had a lot of joy in it. And that's the other side of the film. There's a lot of humour in the film. And I think, that's the thing that sustains people, and it's the thing that's consistent through Indigenous culture.
A lot of laughs and a lot of pain, a protest movie and a music movie. Why don't we hear a little bit? Ned Lander, thanks so much for joining us. Ned's the director of The Wrong Side of the Road, which screens tonight, remastered 32
by the
years
National
later.
Film and Sound Archive.
Give them a plug. It's going to be playing at the Sydney Film Festival tonight. Let's just have a little listen to some of the music we've been talking about. This is from the soundtrack from the movie. It's a terrific soundtrack. And this track is Black Man's Rights by No Fixed Address.
For we are getting brainwashed, and the people forgetting about our rights. So, all you black people, you got to fight for your rights. You got to fight for your rights.